The pipe wrench slipped from my grip for the third time that morning, clattering against the concrete floor of my basement workshop. I wiped the sweat from my forehead and stared at the stubborn joint that refused to cooperate. Just like everything else in my life lately, it seemed determined to fight me. "Eli, where did you put my yoga mat?" Liv's voice echoed down the stairs, sharp with that particular brand of irritation I'd grown accustomed to over the past few months. "Check the hall closet," I called back, not looking up from the pipe. The wrench found its grip this time, and I gave it a firm turn. Sometimes things just needed the right pressure applied at the right angle. "My name is Eli Parish, and I've spent the better part of 15 years building things. Started with a hammer and a pickup truck, worked my way up to owning Parish Construction. Nothing fancy, but honest work that kept food on the table and a roof over our heads. The kind of work that gets your hands dirty, but lets you sleep clean at night. At least that's what I used to think." Liv's footsteps thundered overhead, moving from room to room with increasing urgency. I could track her progress by the sound. Bedroom to bathroom, bathroom to kitchen, kitchen to living room. Each step carried a weight of frustration that seemed to press down through the floorboards. "It's not there," she shouted. I set down the wrench and climbed the stairs, wiping my hands on an old rag. Liv stood in the middle of our living room, hands on her hips, wearing those expensive workout clothes that cost more than most people made in a day. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, not a strand out of place despite her apparent distress. "Did you check behind the winter coats?" I asked, opening the closet door and moving aside the heavy jackets we hadn't needed since March. Of course I checked there. Her tone suggested I was an idiot for even asking. I pulled out the purple yoga mat and handed it to her. It had been right where I said it would be, wedged between my old work jacket and her rarely worn wool coat. "Thanks," she muttered, not meeting my eyes. "Late for class?" "Megan's picking me up in 10 minutes. We're trying that new hot yoga place over in Camden." She rolled the mat tightly, her movements precise and controlled. Everything Liv did was precise and controlled these days. I nodded and headed back toward the basement. "Have fun." "Eli, wait." Something in her voice made me pause at the top of the stairs. I turned back to find her watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. We'd been married for 8 years, together for 10, and there was a time when I could interpret every subtle shift in her features. Lately, though, she'd become as hard to read as architectural blueprints written in a foreign language. "What's up?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again, shook her head. "Nothing, just, we should talk later, when I get back." "About what?" "Just things. Us. Everything." She grabbed her keys from the kitchen counter and headed for the door. "I'll be back around noon." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving me alone with the echo of her words and a growing knot in my stomach. In my experience, when a woman says you need to talk about us and everything, you're about to get news that'll knock you sideways. I went back to the basement and focused on the pipe. Physical problems had physical solutions. Apply the right tool with the right amount of pressure, and things fell into place. If only relationships worked the same way. The morning crawled by. I fixed the pipe, organized my toolbox, and started sketching plans for the Henderson deck project. But my mind kept drifting to Liv's words and the look on her face. We'd been growing apart for months. I wasn't blind to that. She'd started spending more time with her friends, staying out later, coming home with stories about people I'd never met and places I'd never been invited to join her. At first, I'd chalked it up to her new fitness business. Liv had left her nursing job 2 years ago to open a boutique studio with her friend Sandra. The transition had been stressful, and I figured she needed time to find her footing. But lately, it felt like she was finding her footing on a path that led away from me. A car door slammed outside, followed by the familiar sound of Liv's key in the lock. I glanced at the clock, 12:15, right on time. "Eli?" she called. "Down here." Her footsteps on the stairs sounded different this time, slower, more deliberate. When she appeared at the bottom of the staircase, still in her workout clothes but with her hair loose around her shoulders, I knew whatever conversation we were about to have would change everything. "How was yoga?" "Fine." She perched on the edge of my workbench, her fingers drumming against the wooden surface. "We need to talk." I set down my pencil and gave her my full attention. "I'm listening." "This isn't working anymore, Eli. Us. This marriage. This life we've built." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been rehearsing them. "I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time." The knot in my stomach tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "What do you want to do about it?" "I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I'd been expecting something like this, but hearing it out loud still hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Is there someone else?" She hesitated just long enough to give me my answer before shaking her head. "This isn't about anyone else. This is about us not being right for each other anymore." I'd been in construction long enough to know when someone was feeding me a line. The pause, the way her eyes shifted to the left, the defensive set of her shoulders, all classic tells. "Who is he?" "Eli, please don't." "Who is he, Liv?" Her composure cracked just slightly. I've been seeing someone, but that's not why I want the divorce. The divorce is because we're not compatible anymore." "How long?" "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She sighed and looked down at her hands. 3 months. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. 3 months. While I'd been working 12-hour days to keep our business afloat and pay for her studio equipment, she'd been building a relationship with another man. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. "Do I know him?" "Chase Brandt. He's in real estate." I knew the name. Brandt had one of those faces you see on bus benches and grocery store ads. 2 white teeth, perfectly styled hair, and a smile that promised to make all your dreams come true for just a small commission. He drove a restored Mustang and wore suits that probably cost more than I made in a month. "How did you meet?" "He helped Sandra find a new location for the studio. We just connected." Connected. That was one way to put it. "So, what happens now?" "I want to file next week. I've already talked to a lawyer." Of course she had. While I'd been worrying about us growing apart, she'd been 3 steps ahead, planning her exit strategy with the thoroughness of a military operation. "What about the house?" "We'll have to sell it. Split everything 50-50. I looked around my workshop, the space where I'd spent countless hours building cabinets for our kitchen, fixing broken appliances, creating the home improvements that had turned our modest house into something special. Every tool had a story, every project a memory. I built this place, Liv, with my own hands. I know, but we both contributed to the marriage. I supported you when you started the business. I gave up my career to help make our life work. Her version of our history was different from mine, but arguing about it wouldn't change anything. She'd already made her choice. The conversation we were having was just a formality. Fine. She blinked, clearly expecting more of a fight. Fine? You want out, you're out. I'm not going to beg you to stay where you don't want to be. Just like that. Just like that. Relief and something that might have been disappointment flickered across her face. Maybe she'd wanted the drama of a big confrontation. Maybe she'd hoped I'd fight for her, make grand gestures, promise to change. But I'd learned a long time ago that you can't build anything solid on a foundation that doesn't want to hold weight. I'll pack some things and stay at Megan's tonight, she said, standing up from the workbench. Take whatever you need. She headed for the stairs, then paused. Eli? For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to happen this way. But it did happen this way. Yes, it did. After she left, I sat in my workshop for a long time, staring at the plans for the Henderson deck. The measurements were precise, the angles calculated, every joint and connection planned out in detail. If only I'd been as careful with my marriage as I was with my construction projects. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Greta Williams. Greta was 73, lived alone, and had made neighborhood surveillance her full-time hobby since retiring from her job at the post office. Saw Liv leave with suitcases. You okay? I typed back, fine, thanks for checking. If you need anything, just holler. Greta might be nosy, but she had a good heart. In a town like ours, having someone who noticed when things weren't right could be more valuable than gold. I spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning my workshop and trying not to think about the conversation with Liv. But every few minutes my mind would drift to Chase Brandt and his perfect teeth, his expensive car, his promises of a better life. 3 months. She'd been planning this for 3 months while I'd been oblivious, working my tail off to build something I thought we were building together. Around 6 o'clock, my phone rang. Nico Valdez, my foreman and the closest thing I had to a best friend, wanted to grab a drink at Dugan's bar. You sound like you could use one, he said, after I'd given him the abbreviated version of my day. That obvious? Brother, I've known you for 5 years. You get that flat tone in your voice when you're processing something big. What happened? Liv wants a divorce. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, well, damn. I'm sorry, man. It's been coming for a while. Still doesn't make it easy. You want to talk about it? Not particularly, but I could use that drink. Meet you at Dugan's in 20. Dugan's bar occupied the ground floor of a converted warehouse near the marina. Frank Dugan had owned the place for 30 years, and in that time, it had become the unofficial town hall for everyone who worked with their hands. Construction workers, fishermen, mechanics, and anyone else who understood the value of honest work and cold drinks gathered there to share stories, solve the world's problems, and occasionally commiserate over life's unexpected curveballs. Nico was already there when I arrived, nursing a bottle and talking to Frank behind the bar. Both men looked up when I walked in, and I could tell from their expressions that Nico had filled Frank in on the basics. Sorry to hear about your troubles, Eli, Frank said, sliding a bottle across the bar. First one's on the house. Thanks, Frank. I took a long pull and let the cold liquid wash away some of the day's tension. The bar was relatively quiet for a Thursday evening. Just a few regulars scattered around the room, the soft murmur of conversation mixing with the sound of a baseball game on the television. So, what's the plan? Nico asked. Get divorced, I guess. Sell the house. Start over. That's it? You're just going to roll over? I looked at my friend. Nico was built like a fire hydrant. Short, solid, and impossible to move when he planted his feet. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home and learning the construction trade. His approach to problems was usually direct and decisive. What would you suggest? Fight for what's yours. Don't let her walk away with half of everything you built while she's running around with some smooth-talking real estate guy. It's not that simple. Why not? Frank leaned against the bar, polishing a glass with practiced efficiency. Because marriage isn't a construction project, Nico. You can't just reinforce the weak spots and expect everything to hold together. Maybe not, Nico said, but that doesn't mean you have to make it easy for her. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with another text from Greta. You might want to see this. Attached was a video file from her doorbell camera. The timestamp showed it was recorded that morning, about an hour after Liv had left for yoga. In the video, I could see Liv, Megan, and a man I didn't recognize standing in Greta's front yard, clearly visible from the camera's angle. The audio was muffled, but I could make out enough to understand they were discussing me. Specifically, they were discussing how to handle me during the divorce proceedings. The unknown man, who I assumed was Liv's lawyer, was giving advice about protecting assets and establishing grounds for a favorable settlement. "What is it?" Nico asked, noticing my expression. I showed him the video. He watched it twice, his jaw tightening with each viewing. "They're planning to screw you over." "Looks that way." Frank set down his glass and came around the bar. "Mind if I take a look?" I handed him the phone. Frank had been married 3 times and divorced twice. He understood the games people played when relationships went sour. After watching the video, he handed the phone back with a grim expression. "Son, you're not just getting divorced. You're getting ambushed." The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. This wasn't just about Liv being unhappy or falling for someone else. This was a coordinated campaign designed to leave me with as little as possible while she walked away with the lion's share of everything we'd built together. "What do I do?" Frank smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "You do what any smart contractor does when he realizes the job is bigger than expected. You reassess the situation, gather better intelligence, and adjust your strategy accordingly." Meaning? Meaning if they want to play games, you'd better learn the rules fast, and you'd better learn them better than they know them. Nico raised his bottle in a mock toast. To learning the rules. I clinked my bottle against his, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they were being joined by something else. Something colder and more calculating. If Liv wanted a war, she was about to discover that underestimating a man who'd built his life from nothing was a serious mistake. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed, for what might be the last time. The house felt different without Liv's presence, quieter, but also somehow more honest. No need to tiptoe around unspoken tensions or pretend everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, studying Greta's video on my phone. Watching it in the light of day, with a clear head, I could pick up details I'd missed the night before. The lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit, had a briefcase and several folders. This wasn't a casual consultation. They'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. My phone rang. Greta's number. "Morning, Eli. Hope you don't mind me sending that video, but I figured you had a right to know what was happening in your own front yard." "I appreciate it, Greta, more than you know. That wife of yours has been getting visitors at odd hours, different cars, people I don't recognize. Yesterday wasn't the first time." Greta's nosiness was starting to look like a valuable asset. "What kind of visitors?" "Well, there's that real estate fellow with the fancy car. He's been by 4 or 5 times in the past month, always when you're at work. Then there's the lawyer from yesterday, and Megan's been coming by a lot more than usual. Would you mind keeping an eye on things, just until this divorce gets sorted out? Honey, I've been keeping an eye on this neighborhood for 20 years, not about to stop now." After hanging up with Greta, I drove to the job site where my crew was framing a new addition for the Morrison family. Construction work had always been my refuge when life got complicated. There was something therapeutic about the rhythm of hammer on nail, the satisfaction of watching walls rise from nothing more than lumber and determination. Nico was already there, directing the crew through the morning setup. He caught my eye and nodded toward the coffee truck that serviced the construction sites in our area. "How you holding up?" he asked as we walked over to get our morning caffeine fix. "Better than yesterday. I think I was in shock." "And now?" "Now I'm getting angry." Nico grinned. "Good. Anger's useful if you channel it right." We got our coffee and found a quiet spot away from the crew. I filled him in on Greta's call and what I'd learned about Liv's visitors. "So she's been planning this for months," Nico said, "while you were working your tail off to pay for her yoga studio and her expensive workout clothes." "Looks that way. What's your next move?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. Unknown number. Eli Parish. "Mr. Parish, this is Janet Morrison. I'm calling about the addition you're building for my parents." Janet was the daughter of our current clients. She lived in Boston but handled a lot of her parents' affairs since they'd gotten older. "What can I do for you, Janet?" "I just got a very disturbing call from someone claiming to represent your company. They said there were problems with your licensing and insurance, and that we should consider hiring a different contractor to finish the job." My grip tightened on the phone. "What exactly did they say?" "They claimed you were having financial difficulties and might not be able to complete the work. They even suggested a replacement contractor, someone named Brandt." Brandt. Chase Brandt. The pieces clicked into place with crystal clarity. "Janet, I can assure you that Parish Construction is fully licensed, insured, and financially sound. Someone is spreading false information about my company." "I figured as much. Dad speaks very highly of you, and the work you've done so far is excellent. But I thought you should know what's being said." After I hung up, Nico was watching me with a concerned expression. "Let me guess. Your wife's boyfriend is trying to sabotage your business." "That's exactly what he's doing." This was escalating beyond a simple divorce. Chase wasn't content to just steal my wife. He wanted to destroy my livelihood as well. The attack on my professional reputation was a direct threat to everything I'd spent 15 years building. "We need to document this," I said, pulling out my phone to make notes. "Every call, every attempt to interfere with our business. If they want to play dirty, we need evidence." "What about fighting back?" "One step at a time. First, we protect what we have. Then we figure out how to return the favor." The rest of the morning was spent dealing with damage control. I called 3 other clients to make sure they hadn't received similar calls. 2 hadn't, but the third, Mrs. Henderson, whose deck we were supposed to start next week, had gotten a visit from Chase himself. "He seemed very professional," she told me over the phone. "Said he was concerned about some legal issues with your company and wanted to make sure I was protected. He even offered to connect me with a more reliable contractor." "Mrs. Henderson, I've been in business for 15 years without a single unresolved complaint. You can check with the Better Business Bureau if you'd like." "Oh, I'm not worried about you, Eli. That young man rubbed me the wrong way. Too slick, if you know what I mean. Like a used car salesman trying to sell me something I don't need." I made a mental note to send Mrs. Henderson a thank you card. Her instincts had probably saved me from losing a significant contract. By lunchtime, I'd contacted all of my current and pending clients. The damage was contained, but the message was clear. Chase was willing to attack my business to get what he wanted. That made this personal in a way that went beyond marriage and divorce. I met Detective Lyle Murphy at a diner near the police station. Lyle had retired from the force 2 years earlier, but still did consulting work for the department. We'd become friends when he'd hired me to build a deck at his new house, and I trusted his judgment on matters involving legal boundaries. "So your wife's boyfriend is trying to destroy your business," Lyle said after I'd explained the situation. "That's harassment, maybe even tortious interference with business relationships." "Can I prove it?" "That's the tricky part. Unless you have recordings or witnesses, it's your word against his. But the pattern you're describing suggests a coordinated effort. That might be enough to get a restraining order." "Would that stop him?" Lyle shrugged. "Depends on how smart he is. Some people back off when they realize they're on law enforcement's radar. Others double down and get themselves in real trouble." "What would you do in my situation?" "Document everything, keep detailed records of every incident, and be very careful about how you respond. The temptation is to fight fire with fire, but that just gives them ammunition to use against you." After lunch, I drove back to the job site to find Nico talking to a man I didn't recognize. The stranger was well-dressed but looked uncomfortable around the construction equipment and materials scattered around the site. "Eli, this gentleman says he's from the building inspector's office," Nico said as I approached. I'd been expecting this. Anonymous complaints to city departments were a common tactic in business disputes. Someone had probably called in concerns about our permits or safety procedures, hoping to tie up our work with bureaucratic delays. "I'm Eli Parish, the contractor. What can I do for you?" "I need to inspect your permits and safety compliance. We received a complaint about potential violations. Of course. Everything's in order. It took an hour to go through all the documentation and walk through the safety checklist. As expected, everything was perfect. My crew knew their business, and I'd never cut corners on permits or safety procedures. "Looks like someone wasted your time," I told the inspector as he prepared to leave. "Happens more often than you'd think. Usually it's neighbors complaining about noise or dust. Sometimes it's business disputes." "Any way to find out who made the complaint?" "Sorry, anonymous complaints are kept confidential." After the inspector left, I gathered my crew for a brief meeting. "Someone's trying to cause problems for our company," I told them. "False complaints, interference with clients, that kind of thing. It's probably related to my divorce, so don't take it personally. But I need everyone to be extra careful about following procedures. No shortcuts, no exceptions." "What kind of problems are we talking about?" asked Tommy, one of my younger workers. "The kind where someone calls your wife and tells her you're about to lose your job," Nico said. "The kind where building inspectors show up looking for violations that don't exist." The crew exchanged glances. They understood. Most of them had families to support, mortgages to pay. An attack on parish construction was an attack on their livelihoods, too. "We've got your back, boss," Tommy said. "Whatever you need." That evening, I sat in my workshop and made a list of everything that had happened since Liv had asked for the divorce. The pattern was clear. This wasn't just about ending our marriage. It was about destroying me completely, personally, professionally, and financially. Chase Brandt had made a serious miscalculation. He'd assumed I was just another blue-collar guy who would roll over when faced with pressure from someone with more money and education. He'd underestimated the value of having deep roots in a small community, loyal employees, and neighbors who paid attention to what happened on their street. Most importantly, he'd underestimated what happens when you threaten something a man has spent his entire adult life building. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off, or things get worse." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Looking forward to it." If Chase wanted to escalate this conflict, he was about to learn that construction workers understand leverage, pressure points, and how to bring down structures that look solid from the outside. The foundation of his perfect life was about to develop some serious cracks. Saturday morning brought the kind of crisp autumn air that made small-town Maine look like a postcard. I was in my workshop early, sharpening chisels and organizing tools, when Greta knocked on my back door. "Morning, Eli. Brought you some coffee and information." She handed me a steaming mug and settled into the old chair I kept in the corner for visitors. Greta had been married to a carpenter for 47 years before he passed, and she understood the sanctuary of a well-organized workshop. "What kind of information?" "The kind that might interest you. Your wife came by yesterday afternoon with that real estate fellow and another man. They spent about an hour inside, taking pictures and measuring rooms." "Pictures?" "Looked like they were documenting everything. The other man had one of those fancy cameras, the kind real estate people use for listings. So they were already preparing to sell the house, probably getting it appraised and photographed for marketing. The speed of their operation was impressive, in a calculated, emotionless way. "There's more," Greta continued. "I happened to be watering my front garden when they came outside. Heard them talking about maximizing value and quick sale strategies. The real estate fellow mentioned something about buyers who don't ask too many questions. That was interesting. In a normal divorce, both parties would want to get the best possible price for shared assets. But if Chase was encouraging a quick sale to buyers who didn't ask questions, it suggested they had reasons to avoid scrutiny. "Thanks, Greta. This is helpful." "There's one more thing. That real estate fellow, he was asking questions about your business. Wanted to know about your equipment, your client list, whether you owned or leased your work trucks." The scope of their intelligence gathering was becoming clear. They weren't just planning to take half of our shared assets. They were conducting a comprehensive assessment of everything I owned, looking for ways to maximize their take and minimize mine. After Greta left, I called Detective Lyle. "They're moving fast," he said, after I'd filled him in. "Sounds like they want to wrap this up before you have time to protect your interests." "What can I do?" "Get your own lawyer, today, and start documenting your assets separately from joint property. If they're planning to claim your business equipment and client relationships as marital assets, you need to be ready to fight." I spent the morning making phone calls. Finding a good divorce lawyer in a small town isn't easy. Everyone knows everyone, and conflicts of interest are common. But I finally connected with Patricia Wells, an attorney from the next town over who specialized in protecting small business owners during divorce proceedings. "Can you meet this afternoon?" she asked after I'd explained my situation. "From what you're describing, we need to move quickly." "I'll be there." Patricia's office was in a converted Victorian house that had been divided into professional suites. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made you glad she was on your side. "Let's start with the basics," she said, opening a legal pad. "How long have you been married, and what assets are we talking about?" I walked her through our financial situation: the house, my business, our savings accounts, retirement funds, and personal property. It was more complicated than I'd realized, especially when it came to parish construction. "The business is the key issue," Patricia said. "If you started it before the marriage, we can argue it's separate property. But any growth in value during the marriage might be considered marital assets. I started the company 2 years before we got married, but it's grown significantly since then. We'll need to establish the premarital value and separate that from marital contributions. Did your wife work in the business?" "She helped with bookkeeping the first couple years, but not recently." Patricia made notes as we talked. After an hour, she leaned back in her chair with a concerned expression. "Eli, I'm going to be direct with you. From what you've described, your wife and her attorney are playing hardball. The business interference, the quick asset assessment, the pressure tactics. They're trying to put you in a position where you'll accept a bad settlement just to make it stop. What do you recommend? We fight back, but we do it smart and legal. No shortcuts, no revenge fantasies. We use the system to protect your interests." "How long will that take?" "Could be months. Maybe longer if they want to drag it out." I thought about the anonymous text message, the attempts to sabotage my business, the coordinated campaign to destroy everything I'd worked for. What if I told you I had evidence that they're trying to interfere with my business relationships? Patricia's eyebrows went up. "What kind of evidence?" I showed her the documentation I'd been keeping, the client calls, the building inspector visit, the pattern of harassment that had emerged over the past few days. "This changes things," she said, after reviewing my notes. "Business interference during divorce proceedings can be grounds for sanctions against the other party. It might also support a claim for damages." "Damages? If we can prove they cost you business, you might be entitled to compensation. More importantly, we can ask the court to order them to stop." For the first time since this mess started, I felt like I had some leverage. Patricia spent another hour explaining the legal process and what to expect. By the time I left her office, I had a strategy and a timeline. But I also had a growing sense that legal remedies might not be enough. Chase and Liv were playing a game where the rules seemed to change whenever it suited them. Maybe it was time to remind them that other people could be creative too. That evening, I drove to Dugan's bar to meet Nico. The place was busier than usual for a Saturday night, filled with the mix of locals and tourists that kept Frank's business profitable during the summer months. "How'd it go with the lawyer?" Nico asked as I joined him at our usual table. "Better than expected. We might be able to fight the business interference legally." "Might?" "Legal processes take time. In the meantime, they're free to keep causing problems." Nico took a long pull from his bottle and looked around the bar. "You know, it's interesting how small towns work. Information travels fast. Reputations can change overnight. What are you getting at? Well, take that real estate guy, Chase Brandt, drives around in his fancy car, acts like he's God's gift to property values. But what do people really know about him? What do you mean? I mean, how long has he been in town? Where did he come from? What's his track record really like? Nico leaned forward. Because I've been asking around, and the answers are interesting. I waited for him to continue. Turns out Mr. Brandt moved here from Portland about 2 years ago, left under circumstances that weren't entirely clear, and some of his recent deals have raised eyebrows among people who know real estate. What kind of eyebrows? The kind that get raised when properties sell for less than they should, or when buyers discover problems that weren't disclosed, or when commissions end up higher than expected. This was news to me. Chase's public image was all about success and professionalism, but Nico was suggesting there might be cracks in that facade. Who told you this? Frank's brother-in-law works at the county clerk's office. He processes property transfers and sees all the paperwork. Says there's been talk about some of Brandt's deals, but nothing anyone could prove. Talk about what specifically? Inflated appraisals. Buyers who backed out at the last minute citing undisclosed problems. A pattern of properties that looked great on paper but had expensive surprises after closing. I thought about what Greta had overheard, Chase's comment about buyers who don't ask too many questions. Maybe there was a reason he preferred clients who weren't too curious about details. This is interesting, but I'm not sure how it helps with my situation. Nico smiled. Maybe it doesn't. But information is like leverage. You never know when it might come in handy. We were interrupted by Frank, who approached our table with an expression that suggested he had something important to share. Eli, I hope you don't mind, but I've been keeping my ears open since you told me about your troubles. What have you heard? Your wife was in here Thursday night with that real estate fellow. They were in the corner booth, thought they were having a private conversation. Frank had been tending bar for 3 decades. He'd developed the ability to overhear conversations without appearing to listen, a skill that made him a valuable source of local intelligence. What were they talking about? Your business, mostly. How to make sure you couldn't hide assets or transfer property to avoid the divorce settlement. They mentioned something about forcing a quick sale of your equipment if you didn't cooperate. The casual ruthlessness of their planning was breathtaking. They weren't just ending our marriage. They were systematically working to destroy my ability to earn a living. There was something else, Frank continued. The real estate fellow got a phone call while they were here. From what I could hear, it sounded like there was a problem with one of his deals. Something about an inspection that didn't go well, and a client who was threatening legal action. Nico and I exchanged glances. This aligned with what he'd learned about Chase's questionable business practices. Did you catch any details? Something about a house in Camden. The buyer found structural problems that weren't disclosed. Expensive problems. After Frank returned to the bar, Nico and I sat in thoughtful silence. The evening had provided a lot of new information, but I wasn't sure how to use it yet. You know what I think? Nico finally said. What? I think Mr. Chase Brandt has been skating on thin ice for a while now, and I think he's using your wife to try to score a big financial win that'll solve some of his problems. You think he's in financial trouble? I think a guy who drives a car that expensive and wears suits that cost more than most people make in a week, but who has to resort to sabotaging small-town contractors, might not be as successful as he wants people to believe. That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything I'd learned. The legal system would provide some protection, but it was slow and reactive. By the time Patricia could get court orders stopping their harassment, they might have already done irreparable damage to my business and reputation. But information was power, and I was starting to accumulate some interesting information about Chase Brandt. The question was how to use it effectively without crossing legal or ethical lines. My phone buzzed with another anonymous text. Last warning, back off or face the consequences. I stared at the message for a moment, then typed back, looking forward to meeting these consequences. should be educational. If Chase wanted to escalate this conflict, he was about to discover that threatening a man's livelihood was like kicking a hornet's nest. You might get away with it once, but the hornets have long memories, and they know how to work together. The consequences he was threatening were about to become a two-way street. Monday morning brought the first real test of Chase's escalation strategy. I arrived at the Morrison job site to find a van from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration parked next to our equipment trailer. "They've been here about 20 minutes, Nico said as I approached. Anonymous complaint about safety violations. The OSHA inspector was thorough, professional, and clearly annoyed at having his time wasted. After 2 hours of examining every piece of equipment, every safety protocol, and every documentation requirement, he found exactly what I knew he'd find. Nothing. "Your operation is cleaner than most," he told me as he packed up his clipboard and camera. "Whoever called this in either has outdated information or is trying to cause you trouble. Any way to find out who made the complaint? You know I can't tell you that, but between you and me, when someone calls in very specific allegations that turn out to be completely false, it usually means they have some other agenda." After the inspector left, I called Patricia Wells. "That's the third harassment incident in 4 days," she said after I'd updated her. "Building Inspector OSHA, client interference. We need to document this pattern and get it in front of a judge. How long will that take?" "I can file for an emergency restraining order this afternoon. If the judge agrees there's a pattern of harassment, we might get a hearing by the end of the week." "And if they ignore the restraining order?" "Then they face contempt of court charges. That gets expensive fast." While Patricia worked on the legal response, I decided it was time to do some reconnaissance of my own. I drove to the address listed on Chase's business website, a small office complex near the marina that housed several professional services. Brandt Real Estate occupied a corner suite with large windows and expensive furnishings. Through the glass, I could see Chase at his desk, talking on the phone with animated gestures. Even from a distance, he looked stressed. I parked across the street and called the number listed on his website. "Brandt Real Estate, Chase speaking." "Mr. Brandt, this is Tom Henderson. I'm looking for someone to help me sell a property in Camden." "Certainly. What type of property are we discussing?" "A 3-bedroom house on Elm Street. I need to sell quickly due to job relocation." There was a pause. "Elm Street, you said?" "That's right. Number 47. Do you know the area?" Another pause, longer this time. "I'm familiar with that neighborhood. When would be convenient for you to meet?" "Actually, let me call you back. I just realized I might have the address wrong." I hung up and watched through the window as Chase immediately made another phone call. His body language suggested the conversation was tense. Lots of hand gestures, leaning back in his chair, running his fingers through his hair. My phone rang. Unknown number. "Yeah? You think you're clever, don't you?" Chase's voice was tight with anger. "I think I'm learning. Thanks for the education. This harassment needs to stop, Parish. I'm trying to be reasonable here." "Reasonable? Like calling OSHA with false complaints? Like trying to steal my clients?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Just like you don't know anything about anonymous text messages or building inspectors showing up at my job sites. Look, your marriage is over. Accept it and move on. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Here's what I'm accepting, Brandt. I'm accepting that you made this personal when you went after my business. I'm accepting that you think I'm some dumb construction worker who'll roll over when you apply pressure. And I'm accepting that you've made some serious miscalculations. Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You want to play games? Let's play games. But remember, I've been building things in this town for 15 years. You've been here 2 years, and from what I hear, you've left quite an impression." I hung up before he could respond. Through the office window, I could see him staring at his phone with an expression that suggested he was beginning to realize this situation might be more complicated than he'd anticipated. That afternoon, I met with Detective Lyle at a coffee shop downtown. He'd spent the morning making some discreet inquiries about Chase's background. "Your instincts were right," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "Mr. Brandt has an interesting history." The folder contained printouts of public records, news articles, and professional licensing information. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd left Portland under a cloud of unresolved complaints and potential legal issues. 3 separate clients filed complaints with the state real estate board, Lyle explained, all involving properties that had undisclosed problems discovered after closing. The complaints were eventually withdrawn, but the pattern suggests he was cutting corners on due diligence. Why were the complaints withdrawn? Hard to say. Could be he settled privately. Could be the clients got tired of fighting. But there's more. Lyle pointed to another document. He had financial problems in Portland, owed back taxes, had a judgment against him from a former business partner. Moving to a smaller market might have been his way of starting fresh. So he's not as successful as he appears? Let's just say the expensive car and fancy clothes might be more about image than substance. And if he's having cash flow problems, a big score from your divorce settlement would be very attractive. This information was valuable, but I wasn't sure how to use it yet. Exposing Chase's financial problems might hurt his business, but it wouldn't necessarily stop the harassment or protect my interests in the divorce. "There's one more thing," Lyle said. "That house on Elm Street you mentioned when you called him? There's a story there." "What kind of story?" "The kind where a client paid full asking price for a house that had a foundation problem the inspector somehow missed. Cost the new owner $30,000 to fix. The client is considering a lawsuit." That explained Chase's reaction when I'd mentioned the address. He was dealing with potential legal exposure from a deal gone wrong. "The client's name is Jennifer Walsh. She's a nurse at the hospital. Might be worth talking to her." I met Jennifer Walsh at a diner near the hospital after her shift ended. She was in her 40s, tired from a long day of work and still angry about the house situation. "I should have known something was wrong when he pushed so hard for a quick closing," she said over coffee. "But the market was competitive, and he convinced me I'd lose the house if I didn't move fast." "What exactly went wrong?" "Foundation settling. The basement had hairline cracks that were painted over to hide them. Within 6 months, they'd opened up enough that water was getting in during heavy rains." "Did the inspection miss it?" "That's what I thought at first. But when I had an engineer look at it, he said the cracks were old. They should have been visible to any competent inspector." "You think the inspection was inadequate?" Jennifer's expression hardened. "I think someone didn't want those cracks found. The inspector Brandt recommended was a friend of his. Very thorough about cosmetic issues, not so much about structural problems." "Are you planning to sue?" "My lawyer says it's complicated. Proving the inspector was negligent or that Brandt knew about the problems is difficult. But we're exploring options." I drove home with a lot to think about. Chase's business practices were questionable, his financial situation was precarious, and he was facing potential legal problems from previous deals. All of that made him dangerous. A man with nothing to lose might be willing to take bigger risks. But it also made him vulnerable. His professional reputation was his most valuable asset, and it was built on a foundation that might not withstand close scrutiny. That evening, I sat in my workshop and made a list of everything I knew about Chase Brandt. The pattern was clear. He was a man living beyond his means, cutting corners to maintain an image of success, and using aggressive tactics to close deals and eliminate competition. My phone buzzed with a text from Liv. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." I stared at the message for several minutes before responding. "I agree. Your boyfriend's harassment campaign needs to stop." "That's not what I meant." "That's exactly what you meant. You just didn't expect me to fight back. Meet me at the house tomorrow at noon. We can settle this like adults." Looking forward to it. I had a feeling tomorrow's conversation would be interesting. Liv was reaching out, which suggested their strategy wasn't working as planned. Maybe the pressure I'd been applying was starting to have an effect, or maybe they were planning to escalate even further. Either way, I was ready for whatever came next. The foundation of their carefully constructed plan was starting to show some serious cracks. Liv was already at the house when I arrived Tuesday at noon. She'd let herself in with her key, and I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the table where we'd shared thousands of meals during our marriage. She looked tired, stressed, and younger somehow, like the confident woman who'd asked for a divorce had been replaced by someone less certain of her choices. "Thanks for coming," she said as I took the chair across from her. "This is still my house, Liv. For now. That's what I want to talk about. This whole situation is getting out of hand." I waited for her to continue. In construction, you learn that silence is a powerful tool. People feel compelled to fill empty air, and they often reveal more than they intended. "Chase says you've been harassing him, calling his office with fake names, following him around town. Chase says a lot of things. Most of them aren't true. He's trying to help us get through this divorce with minimal damage to both of us. The harassment needs to stop." I leaned back in my chair and studied my wife's face. Even after 8 years of marriage, she could still surprise me. The idea that she genuinely believed Chase was trying to minimize damage was either naive or deliberately obtuse. "Liv, in the past week, your boyfriend has filed false complaints with OSHA and the building inspector, tried to steal 3 of my clients, and sent anonymous threatening text messages. If anyone's being harassed, it's me." "That's not true." "Which part?" "Chase wouldn't do those things. He's a professional." "So professional that he's facing a lawsuit from a client who bought a house with undisclosed foundation problems?" Her expression flickered. Surprise, then something that might have been doubt. "How do you know about that?" "Small towns, Liv. Information travels fast." She was quiet for a moment, processing this news. I could see her mental gears turning, trying to reconcile the Chase she thought she knew with the Chase other people had experienced. "Even if that's true, it doesn't justify what you're doing." "What exactly am I doing?" "Playing games. Making this harder than it needs to be. We could settle everything quickly and move on with our lives." "Your version of settling quickly involves me giving up half of everything I've built while you and Chase ride off into the sunset. That's not settling, that's robbery. It's a fair division of marital assets. Assets you were planning to hide and manipulate. I know about the photographs, the appraisals, the strategies for forcing quick sales. I know about the attempts to interfere with my business relationships." Liv's composure was starting to crack. The confident woman who'd asked for a divorce was being replaced by someone who looked cornered and uncertain. "I want this to be amicable, Eli, but you're making it impossible." "Amicable went out the window when your boyfriend started sabotaging my livelihood. You want amicable? Call off the harassment campaign and negotiate in good faith. And if I do that, you'll stop whatever you're planning?" "I'm not planning anything, Liv. I'm reacting to what you and Chase have already done. You escalated this conflict. I'm just responding in kind." She stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where I'd built a deck, planted a garden, and created the kind of home I'd dreamed about as a kid growing up in a trailer park. "I never wanted it to be like this." "Then why is it like this?" "Because Chase said you'd try to fight the divorce, drag it out, make it expensive and ugly. He said we needed to be proactive." "So the harassment was preemptive?" "It was protection." "Protection from what?" "I hadn't done anything except agree to the divorce." She turned back to face me, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. "He said you'd try to hide assets, claim the business was separate property, make it impossible for me to get a fair settlement." "Did you ever ask me what I was planning?" No. Because if you had, I would have told you that I was planning to be fair, split things down the middle, sell the house, move on. The only thing I wanted to protect was my ability to keep working." The tears were flowing now. I made a mistake. Which mistake? Asking for a divorce, having an affair, or trusting Chase to manage the process? All of it. I don't know. I'm confused. This was a side of Liv I hadn't seen in months. Vulnerable, uncertain, human. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the connection that had brought us together in the first place. But then I remembered the past week. The false complaints, the client interference, the systematic campaign to destroy my professional reputation. The woman crying in my kitchen might be genuinely remorseful, but the damage was already done. What do you want from me, Liv? I want us to find a way to end this without destroying each other. That's up to Chase. He's the one who made this personal. What if I could get him to stop? Can you? She hesitated. I think so. If I explained that you're willing to be reasonable. I've been reasonable from the beginning. The question is whether Chase can afford to stop. What do you mean? I decided to share some of what I'd learned. Not everything. I wasn't ready to show all my cards yet, but enough to help her understand the situation she'd gotten herself into. Your boyfriend is in financial trouble, Liv. He's got legal problems from previous deals, tax issues, and a lifestyle that costs more than his business generates. A big settlement from our divorce would solve a lot of his problems. That's not true. Ask him about the house on Elm Street. Ask him about why he left Portland. Ask him about the complaints filed with the state real estate board. Her face went pale. How do you know about all this? Because when someone tries to destroy my livelihood, I make it my business to learn everything I can about them. You're trying to turn me against him. I'm trying to help you understand who you're dealing with. Chase isn't some successful real estate mogul who fell in love with you. He's a guy with serious problems who sees our divorce as a financial opportunity. You're lying. Am I? Then explain why he's so interested in forcing a quick settlement. Explain why he's going after my business instead of just focusing on the divorce. Explain why he's willing to risk harassment charges and legal sanctions. She didn't have answers for those questions, and we both knew it. I need to go, she said, gathering her purse and keys. Liv, wait. She paused at the kitchen door. For what it's worth, I'm sorry our marriage didn't work out. But I'm not sorry I'm fighting back. You and Chase made a choice to play hardball. Now you get to live with the consequences. After she left, I sat in the empty kitchen for a long time, thinking about the conversation. Liv's tears had seemed genuine, and her confusion appeared real. But I'd learned not to trust appearances where she was concerned. My phone rang. Patricia Wells. Good news, she said. I got the emergency restraining order. Judge Kavanaugh signed it an hour ago. Mr. Brandt is officially prohibited from interfering with your business relationships or contacting your clients. How enforceable is it? Very. If he violates the order, he faces contempt charges and possible jail time. I'm having it served this afternoon. What about anonymous complaints to regulatory agencies? Harder to prove, but the pattern we've documented gives us grounds to ask for broader protection if it continues. After hanging up with Patricia, I called Nico to update him on the restraining order and the conversation with Liv. Think she'll be able to control her boyfriend? He asked. I doubt it. Chase has too much invested in this strategy to back down easily, and he's got financial pressures that won't go away just because Liv asks nicely. So what's next? We wait and see how he responds to the restraining order. If he's smart, he'll back off and focus on the legal divorce proceedings. If he's desperate, he'll try to find ways around it. And if he's desperate? Then things get interesting. That evening, I was in my workshop when Greta knocked on the door. Thought you should know, she said. Your wife's boyfriend just got served with some kind of legal papers. Happened right in front of his office. The process server had to wait for him to come outside because he wouldn't answer the door. How do you know all this? My nephew works at the marina. He saw the whole thing from the docks. Said the real estate fellow looked pretty upset about whatever was in those papers. I bet he did. There's something else. After the process server left, he made a phone call. Lot of shouting and arm waving. Then he got in his car and drove off like he was in a hurry. Which direction? toward your house. I thanked Greta and locked up the workshop. If Chase was headed this way, I wanted to be ready for whatever conversation was about to happen. But when I got to the front of the house, the street was empty. No sign of Chase's Mustang or any other unfamiliar vehicles. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Restraining order won't protect you forever. This isn't over. I stared at the message, then typed back, looking forward to the next round. Chase had just made his response to the legal pressure clear. Instead of backing down, he was doubling down. The restraining order had contained his ability to interfere with my business directly, but it hadn't addressed his underlying motivations. A desperate man with financial problems and legal exposure was dangerous, but he was also predictable. Desperation led to mistakes, and mistakes created opportunities. The game was entering a new phase, and I had a feeling the stakes were about to get much higher. The next morning brought news that changed everything. I was having coffee in my kitchen when Detective Lyle called with information that put the entire situation in a new perspective. Remember that client I mentioned? Jennifer Walsh, the nurse with the foundation problems? What about her? She found something interesting when she was cleaning out the basement yesterday. A folder wedged behind the water heater, probably left by the previous owner. What kind of folder? The kind that contains correspondence between the seller and Chase Brandt about known structural issues with the house, dated 3 weeks before Jennifer made her offer. I set down my coffee cup. So Chase knew about the foundation problems before the sale? Knew about them, discussed repair options with the seller, and then decided not to disclose them to the buyer. That's fraud, Eli. The kind that can cost someone their real estate license and open them up to criminal charges. Has Jennifer contacted the authorities? She's meeting with the district attorney this afternoon. But here's the interesting part. She asked me to reach out to you first. Why? Because she heard through the grapevine that you've been having problems with Brandt. She wanted to know if you'd be interested in sharing information. This was the break I'd been hoping for. Jennifer Walsh had evidence of actual criminal behavior, not just harassment or unethical business practices. That changed the entire dynamic of my conflict with Chase. What does she want from me? She wants to know if you have evidence of a pattern of fraudulent behavior. Multiple victims make a stronger case than a single incident. I thought about everything I'd learned over the past week. The questionable deals in Portland, the clients who'd withdrawn complaints, the aggressive tactics Chase used to close sales quickly. I might be able to help with that. Good, because there's something else. The DA's office has been getting inquiries about Brandt from other jurisdictions. Looks like his past is starting to catch up with him. After hanging up with Lyle, I called Patricia Wells to update her on this development. This is significant, she said. If Brandt is facing criminal charges, it puts enormous pressure on him to settle your divorce quickly and quietly. He can't afford the scrutiny that would come with a prolonged legal battle. What does that mean for me? It means you're in a much stronger negotiating position, but it also means he's more desperate, which could make him more dangerous. Dangerous how? Desperate people make bad decisions. If he feels cornered, he might try something reckless. I spent the rest of the morning documenting everything I knew about Chase's business practices and harassment campaign. If Jennifer Walsh was building a criminal case, I wanted to make sure she had all the information I could provide. Around noon, my phone rang, Liv's number. Eli, we need to talk. Right now. About what? Chase is... Something's wrong. He's talking about leaving town, starting over somewhere else. He wants me to come with him. And? And I don't know what to do. Everything's happening so fast. Where are you? At the studio. Can you meet me here? Liv's fitness studio was in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and polished concrete floors. I found her in the main workout room, sitting on a bench surrounded by the exercise equipment she'd worked so hard to afford. She looked terrible. Red eyes, disheveled hair, the kind of exhaustion that comes from too much stress and too little sleep. Talk to me, I said, taking a seat on the bench across from her. Chase came to see me this morning. He was different. Scared, maybe. He said there were people asking questions about his business, that someone was trying to destroy his reputation. What kind of questions? About houses he'd sold, clients who'd had problems, deals that went wrong. He said it was all lies and rumors, but he seemed really worried. Did he mention any specific clients? Someone named Jennifer. He said she was trying to blame him for problems with her house that weren't his fault. I kept my expression neutral. What else did he say? He wants to leave Maine, start fresh in Florida or California, somewhere warm where nobody knows us. He asked me to come with him. What did you tell him? I told him I needed time to think, but Eli, I'm scared. The way he was talking, the look in his eyes. I've never seen him like that. What are you scared of? I think he might be in serious trouble, legal trouble, and I think he might have done things, bad things, to try to solve his problems. She was finally starting to see Chase for who he really was, but it might be too late. If he was planning to leave town, he had nothing left to lose. That made him unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Liv, I need you to listen to me carefully. Chase is facing potential criminal charges for real estate fraud. The harassment campaign against me was just the tip of the iceberg. Criminal charges? He sold a house to a woman named Jennifer Walsh, knowing it had serious structural problems. He hid those problems from her, and now she's out $30,000 in repair costs. That's fraud. Liv's face went white. Oh no. There's more. He's got a history of similar problems in Portland. The authorities are connecting the dots. What does this mean for me? It means you need to be very careful. If Chase is planning to run, he might try to take you with him whether you want to go or not. And if he's been using you to gather information about my assets, you could be considered an accomplice. I never meant for any of this to happen. I know, but intentions don't matter now. What matters is what you do next. What should I do? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the old motel on Route 1. Come alone. 1 hour. I showed the message to Liv. Her face went even paler. That's Chase's number, the one he uses for business calls. Why does he want to meet at the motel? I don't know. But Eli, don't go. Something's wrong. He's not thinking clearly. I looked at my wife, soon to be ex-wife, and saw genuine fear in her eyes. Whatever game Chase had been playing was reaching its conclusion, and she was finally understanding the stakes. I have to go. Why? Because if I don't, he'll escalate, and the next target might be you. Come with me to the police station. Tell them about the message. And tell them what? That my wife's boyfriend wants to meet me at a motel? They can't arrest someone for sending text messages. Then don't go alone. I thought about that. She was right. Meeting Chase alone at an isolated location was risky, but bringing backup might provoke the kind of confrontation I was trying to avoid. I'll call Detective Lyle. Have him keep an eye on things from a distance. Promise me you'll be careful. I promise. I called Lyle and explained the situation. He agreed to position himself near the motel, close enough to intervene if things went wrong, but far enough away to avoid provoking Chase. This feels like a trap, he said. Maybe. But it might also be his way of trying to negotiate an end to this mess. What could he possibly offer you? Information, cooperation, maybe an admission that would help with the divorce proceedings. Or maybe he's planning to eliminate the biggest threat to his escape plan. That was a sobering thought, but I'd come too far to back down now. The old motel on Route 1 had been closed for 2 years, a victim of changing travel patterns and deferred maintenance. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds, the windows were boarded up, and the whole place had the desolate feel of dreams that had died slowly. Chase's Mustang was parked near the office, engine running. I pulled up 20 feet away and got out of my truck, keeping my hands visible and my movements slow and deliberate. Chase emerged from his car looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and his eyes had the wild look of someone who'd been backed into a corner. "Thanks for coming," he said, his voice tight with stress. "What do you want, Chase?" "I want to end this, all of it. The harassment, the legal games, the whole mess." "I'm listening." "I'm leaving town, tonight. I've got a job opportunity in Tampa and I'm taking it." "What about Liv?" "That's between me and her. But I wanted to talk to you first, man to man, and see if we could work something out." "What kind of something?" "You back off on whatever investigation you've been conducting, and I'll make sure the divorce goes smoothly. No more interference with your business. No more games. Clean separation. Fair division of assets." I studied his face, looking for tells. He was nervous, desperate, but also calculating. This wasn't surrender. It was negotiation. "What makes you think I'm investigating anything?" "Come on, Parish. You think I'm stupid? The questions people have been asking, the timing of that nurse's lawsuit, the way information about my past suddenly became public knowledge. You've been working to destroy my reputation." "Your reputation destroyed itself. I just helped people see the truth. The truth, according to you. The truth according to public records, court documents, and client complaints." Chase's composure cracked slightly. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The financial problems, the legal issues, the need to generate income quickly. Sometimes you have to cut corners to survive." "Cut corners? You committed fraud, Chase. You sold people houses with problems you knew about but didn't disclose." "That's not how it happened." "That's exactly how it happened. And now you're facing criminal charges." "Which is why I'm leaving. Fresh start, clean slate." "What about the people you cheated? What about Jennifer Walsh and the $30,000 she had to spend fixing problems you hid from her?" "That's not my responsibility anymore." "See, that's where you're wrong. Running away doesn't make your problems disappear. It just makes you a fugitive." Chase's expression hardened. "I'm trying to be reasonable here, Parish. I'm offering you a way out of this mess that protects everyone. Everyone, except your victims." "My victims? What about me? What about what you've done to my business, my reputation, my relationship with Liv?" "What I've done? You started this war when you decided to sabotage my livelihood. Everything that's happened since then has been consequences." "Consequences?" Chase laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about consequences? Let me tell you about consequences." He reached into his jacket, and for a moment I tensed, wondering if he was armed, but he pulled out a manila folder instead. "You know what's in here? Copies of every financial document related to your business, bank statements, tax returns, client contracts, equipment loans, everything I need to prove that you've been hiding assets and underreporting income." "That's impossible. You don't have access to my financial records." "Don't I? Your wife had access to everything, and she's been very helpful in documenting your attempts to defraud her in the divorce proceedings." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Liv had been gathering evidence against me, probably for months, building a case that would paint me as the dishonest party in our divorce. "You're lying." "Am I? Check your home office, Parish. See what's missing from your filing cabinets. See what documents have been photocopied when you weren't around." My mind raced through the implications. If Chase had comprehensive financial information about my business, he could use it to support claims that I was hiding assets or manipulating income to avoid fair division in the divorce. "What do you want?" "I want you to back off. Stop the investigation, stop interfering with my business, stop trying to destroy my relationship with your wife. In exchange, I'll make sure these documents never see the light of day. And if I don't? Then I'll use them to prove you're a liar and a cheat. Your wife will get everything in the divorce, your business will be destroyed by the scandal, and you'll be left with nothing." It was a clever trap. Chase had maneuvered me into a position where fighting back would result in my own destruction. He'd used my wife to gather ammunition, then positioned himself as the reasonable party trying to resolve the situation peacefully. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I cared more about protecting my assets than exposing the truth. "You know what, Chase? You can keep those documents." "What?" "Use them however you want, because I'd rather lose everything I own than let you get away with what you've done." "You're bluffing." "Try me." Chase's confident expression began to waver. He'd expected me to cave under pressure, to choose financial security over principle. The fact that I was willing to call his bluff clearly hadn't been part of his plan. "You'll lose everything. Maybe, but you'll lose more." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means Jennifer Walsh is meeting with the district attorney today. It means the authorities in Portland are reopening their investigation into your business practices. It means your past is catching up with you faster than you can run from it." "You can't prove anything." "I don't have to. Jennifer Walsh can prove you committed fraud. The Portland authorities can prove you left town under suspicious circumstances. The pattern of complaints and legal problems speaks for itself." Chase was starting to look genuinely panicked now. The confident negotiator was being replaced by a desperate man who was running out of options. "This isn't over, Parish." "Yes, it is. You just don't realize it yet." He got back in his car and drove off, leaving me alone in the parking lot of the abandoned motel. I called Detective Lyle to let him know the meeting was over, then sat in my truck for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. Chase's revelation about the financial documents was troubling, but not surprising. I'd suspected Liv was more involved in the harassment campaign than she'd admitted. The extent of her betrayal was painful, but it didn't change the fundamental situation. My phone rang. Patricia Wells. "Eli, I just got a call from opposing counsel. They want to schedule a settlement conference for tomorrow morning." "What's the rush?" "I'm not sure, but they're suddenly very motivated to resolve this quickly. Chase just tried to blackmail me with copies of my financial records that Liv apparently provided to him. That's a serious breach of fiduciary duty. If she was gathering evidence against you while still married, it could invalidate anything they try to use. What do you recommend? We go to the settlement conference and see what they're offering. But we go prepared for anything." That evening, I sat in my workshop and thought about everything that had happened over the past week. The harassment campaign, the legal maneuvering, the personal betrayals, all of it had led to this moment where the truth was finally coming to light. Chase was facing criminal charges and would probably be leaving town soon, either voluntarily or in custody. Liv was about to discover that the man she'd chosen over me was a fraud who'd used her to gather evidence for his own purposes. And I was about to find out just how much my marriage and my assets were worth in the cold mathematics of divorce court. But whatever happened next, I'd fought back. I'd refused to be bullied or manipulated. I'd stood up for myself and for the other people Chase had victimized. Sometimes, that's all you can do. Sometimes fighting back is its own reward, regardless of the outcome. Tomorrow would bring the final confrontation, the last act in this drama that had consumed my life for the past week. Whatever happened, I'd face it with the knowledge that I'd given as good as I'd gotten. The foundation of my old life might be crumbling, but I was ready to start building something new. The settlement conference took place in a sterile conference room at the courthouse, with Patricia Wells on my side of the table and Liv's attorney, David Morrison, representing her interests. Chase was notably absent. According to Morrison, he'd left town suddenly due to a family emergency. Liv looked exhausted and defeated. The confident woman who'd asked for a divorce just a week ago had been replaced by someone who seemed to have aged years in a matter of days. "My client is prepared to accept a 50-50 division of assets," Morrison began, "with the understanding that both parties want to resolve this matter quickly and amicably." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a change from your initial demands for a 70-30 split in your client's favor." "Circumstances have changed." "Yes, they have. Your client's boyfriend is facing criminal fraud charges and has apparently fled the jurisdiction. That does tend to change circumstances. Morrison's jaw tightened. Mr. Brandt's legal issues are not relevant to this divorce proceeding. They are when he was actively involved in gathering evidence and developing strategy for your client's case. They're especially relevant when that evidence was obtained through potentially illegal means. I watched Liv during this exchange. She kept her eyes down, focusing on her hands folded in her lap. The weight of her choices was clearly crushing her. "What are you proposing?" Morrison asked. Patricia slid a document across the table. 50-50 split of marital assets, as originally suggested. Mr. Parish keeps his business and equipment, which predates the marriage. Mrs. Parish keeps her fitness studio, which was purchased with marital funds, but represents her separate career interests. "That seems reasonable," Morrison said after reviewing the proposal. "There's one additional condition," Patricia continued. "Mrs. Parish must provide a written statement detailing any information she shared with Mr. Brandt about her husband's business and finances. This is necessary to assess potential damages from the harassment campaign." Liv looked up for the first time during the meeting. "What kind of statement?" "A complete accounting of what information you provided, when you provided it, and how it was used. Mr. Brandt attempted to use that information for blackmail purposes. We need to understand the full scope of the breach." "I never meant for him to use it that way." "Nevertheless, you provided confidential information to a third party who used it to harm your husband's interests. That has legal consequences." Morrison whispered something to Liv, who nodded reluctantly. "My client will provide the requested statement." "Good. Then we have a deal." The actual paperwork took another hour to complete, but the essential elements were straightforward. Liv would keep the studio and half of our savings. I would keep the house, my business, and my equipment. We would both walk away with enough to start over, which was more than I'd expected when this mess began. As we prepared to leave, Liv approached me in the hallway outside the conference room. "Eli, I want you to know how sorry I am. About everything. I know. Chase told me you were planning to hide assets, that you would try to cheat me in the divorce. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Why? Because it made it easier to justify what I was doing. If you were the bad guy, then I was just protecting myself. And now? Now I realize I was the bad guy all along." There wasn't much to say to that. Liv had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. We all were. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Keep the studio running. Try to rebuild my reputation. Figure out how to live with what I've done." "What about Chase?" "He's gone. Left town yesterday without saying goodbye. I found out this morning that he emptied our joint account and canceled the lease on his office. So Chase had run after all, taking whatever money he could grab and leaving Liv to face the consequences of their actions alone. It was a fitting end to their relationship, though I took no pleasure in her pain. "I'm sorry, Liv." "No, you're not, and you shouldn't be. I made my bed, as they say." 3 months later, I was sitting in Dugan's bar with Nico, celebrating the completion of the Henderson Deck project. The harassment campaign was a memory, the divorce was finalized, and parish construction was busier than ever. Word had gotten around town about how I'd handled the situation, and apparently people respected someone who fought back against bullies. "So what's next?" Nico asked, raising his bottle in a toast. "Next, we build things. Houses, decks, additions, whatever people need. Same as always." "What about the house? You keeping it?" I'd been thinking about that a lot lately. The house held too many memories, both good and bad. It was time for a fresh start. "I'm going to sell it. Buy some land outside town. Build something new from the ground up." Sounds like a plan. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Lyle. "Thought you'd want to know. Chase Brandt was arrested in Florida yesterday. Jennifer Walsh's case is moving forward." I showed the message to Nico, who grinned. Justice served. Eventually. Frank came over to refill our drinks and join the conversation. Heard your ex-wife is selling the fitness studio. Really? Yeah. Sandra's buying her out, taking over the whole operation. Liv's moving back to Portland, going back to nursing. That made sense. Liv needed to start over somewhere she wasn't known as the woman who'd betrayed her husband and gotten involved with a criminal. Portland was big enough for her to disappear into, to rebuild her life away from the consequences of her choices. Think you'll ever forgive her? Nico asked. I considered the question. Forgiveness was complicated. I wasn't angry anymore. That had burned out weeks ago. But forgetting wasn't the same as forgiving, and trust, once broken, was almost impossible to rebuild. I don't know. Maybe someday. But it doesn't matter now. Why not? Because forgiveness is about the past, and I'm more interested in the future. I finished my drink and looked around the bar at the faces of people I'd known for years. Construction workers, fishermen, mechanics, and others who understood the value of honest work and straight dealing. These were my people, this was my community, and this was where I belonged. Chase Brandt had tried to destroy everything I'd built, using lies, manipulation, and harassment. But he'd underestimated the strength of deep roots and the power of truth. In the end, his house of cards had collapsed while my foundation remained solid. That was the difference between building something real and constructing an elaborate facade. Real things lasted. Everything else was just temporary scaffolding that eventually got torn down. I walked out of Dugan's bar into the cool evening air, thinking about the land I'd been looking at outside town. 5 acres of woods and meadow, with a view of the mountains and room to build the kind of house I'd always dreamed about. It was time to start building again.